multiplication. What does it really mean? Today we're going to answer that question. Perhaps you're sitting there thinking, well, multiplication is the product of two or more numbers. You're right. If you know that multiplication means combining equal groups or equal sets, then you too are correct. And perhaps the definition you remember the most is the definition you learned when you were first introduced to multiplication, repeated addition. All of those are correct. But what do these really mean, and how does knowing what they really mean help us solve them? This one really does mean 16 groups of 4. So if you wanted to write 16 4 times, or 4 16 times, you could. Or if you wanted to count by 4 16 times, there's numerous ways to solve it. But those aren't necessarily efficient. So let's talk about what it really means. 4 times 16 is the same as 4 groups of 16. And if I were using base 10 blocks, I might first get 4 groups of 10 and then 4 groups of 6. So it might look like 4 groups of 10 and 4 groups of 6. 40 and 24. And so 16 times 4 is 64. Because anytime we have the multiplication sign, we can take out the multiplication sign and put in the words groups of. So, what does 35 times 27 really mean? 35 groups of 27. Definitely not something I want to do repeated addition with. But maybe I could use the distributive property, or maybe I could break this apart to help me figure out that I would have to do 27 groups of 5 and 27 groups of 30. 27 groups of 5 and 27 groups of 30 would be a nice way to count it out, but I don't know what 27 groups of 5 is. How would I get 27 groups of 5 from my base 10 blocks? Well, maybe I would get 5 groups of 7, and then I would get 5 groups of 20. Oh, that makes 27 groups of 5. And then 30 groups of 7 and 30 groups of 20. So if I multiply each of these, 5 times 2 is 10 with a 0. 3 times 7 is 21. So 30 times 7 is 210. 3 times 2 is 6. So 30 times 20 is 600. And then adding these together gives me 945. Well, could I do it with this one? Sure, it just means that instead of having 4 problems here, I would have 6 problems. Let's try it. 832 groups of 4 and 832 groups of 10. Well, that means that I would do 4 groups of 2 and 4 groups of 30 and 4 groups of 800. Then I would do 10 groups of 2 and 10 groups of 30 and 10 groups of 800. Now, multiply those. 4 times 3 is 12 with a 0 is 120. 4 times 8 is 32 with 2 zeros is 3,200. 10 times 2 is 20. 10 times 30 is 300. And 10 times 800 is 8,000. Finding the sum of those numbers would give me the product of these answers. So, I'm not showing you this because I want you to write out all of these problems every time you solve it. But I want you to understand what it is that multiplication really means. And the more place value you have up here, of course the more problems you're going to have down here and the larger your answer is going to be. We're going to look at these same problems a couple different ways and see if we can establish a little more understanding. Now you saw that those last problems filled up that board completely. So perhaps putting them in an organized grid would help me solve the problems correctly. This box is the box I would use for a 2-digit by 1-digit number. And this is using a grid with the true values of the number. So we drew a grid and we're going to write the true value of each digit. What is the value of the 4? 4. What is the value of the 1? 10. And the value of the 6 is 6. You can see that these two make 16. So by using this grid, 16 times 4, I can line up my answers and not have to rewrite the problems. In this box, I would multiply the number straight up and straight over. The numbers on the outside of the box that both sides can touch. Very similar to reading a coordinate grid. 6 times 4 is 24. 4 times 10. Put your finger in the box and go straight up and straight over. 40. The numbers inside the box are the numbers that you then add. 40 plus 24 is 64. So let's move on to a 2 by 2 number. 35 and 27. 35 and 27. So I've just rewritten these numbers with their true values. Now, using your skills from reading a coordinate grid, you put your finger in the box and you go straight up and straight over. So in this box, I would have to do 30 times 20, which is 600. 5 times 20, which is 100. 5 times 7, which is 35. And 30 times 7, which is 210. Now my job is to add these numbers, and mental math can definitely come in handy because I can combine any of these numbers I can do in my head. 100 plus 600 is 700. 700, maybe I would write it out here to the side to remember it. 35 plus 210 is 245. And so my answer is 945. Now let's try our third problem another way. 832. Place value lines for each number that I'm multiplying. 832 times 14. And 14 is 10 and 4. And again, I'm going to put my finger in the box, go straight up and straight over, and multiply. I'm going to remember my 0 rule because these numbers are going to get fairly large. 800 times 10 is the same as 8 times 1 with 3 zeros. 30 times 10 is the same thing as 3 times 1 with 2 zeros. 2 times 10 is 20. Straight up and straight over says do 2 times 4. Straight up to 30, straight over to 4. 30 times 4 is 120. And 800 times 4 is the same as 4 times 8 with 2 zeros. 3,200. And again, I can combine any of these that are easily to put in my head, like 8,320. 3,200 plus 128 is 3,320. 328. So my answer is 11,648. I've simply used the true value of the numbers, and from one step to the next, I didn't have to write out all of the problems. I just used the boxes. But as you can tell, when you begin to get multiplying by bigger numbers, zeros, which are important, may become a problem. So, let's do the same problems, but this time draw our place value lines before we start. So if I divide this number into diagonal lines, I have made the ones place, the tens place, and the hundreds place. Each diagonal line has turned into a place value. So because we're dealing with place value, this is 4 and this is 16. So now I'm still using the same trick. I'm looking at straight up and straight over. I'm just simply writing 24 in the place value lines. 2 tens and 4 ones. Over here, this is in the tens place, so I'm multiplying 10 times 4, or 1 times 4, which is 4. And you can see now that if I add what's inside the place value, this is 4, and this is 6, and 64 is the answer. Let's try lattice with these. First, draw your place value lines, which is top right to bottom left in each box, and then write your numbers. Because you drew place value lines, putting the true value is not necessary with lattice. Still putting my finger here and going straight up and straight over. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 7 is 21. And now, kind of taking my eyes away from the red and focusing just on the blue, you add what's inside your diagonals. And again, 945 is the answer we've gotten all 3 times we've solved that. Let's try lattice with this. Top right to bottom left in each box. And 832 times 14. I have an extra box, which is not a problem. I can leave it there because it won't change the answer, or I can eliminate it. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 8 times 1 is 8. And 8 times 4 is 32. 8. So we are adding what's in here. 3 plus 1 plus 2 is 6. 8 plus 3 is 11. When you're adding and you have more than a 10, you carry and regroup. So my answer is 11,648. Let's look at why all of these work. I've solved each problem 4 different ways and have color-coded them so you can see how the place value transferred. This is a traditional multiplication problem where your parents had probably learned. This is the way that I learned. But it's really important that we understand why all of these work, because as we progress into our algebra unit, we're going to be multiplying variables and using the distributive property like this. So let's look at why numbers work so many different ways. You can see the color code here for the ones place. I've made the number 24 in blue in each of these problems. I've made the number 40 in red in each of these problems. Now this is obviously a 40 and this is obviously a 40. But this is a 40 because you have to remember that this is the ones place and this is a tens place. And 4 tens makes 40. Where's the 40 over here? Well, it was combined, 4 times 10 was 4, with the 2 tens that were here, and we got 6. This is the traditional way of multiplication, probably the fastest, but also the easiest to make mistakes. This form of multiplication yields the least amount of mistakes, but sometimes isn't the most efficient. Looking here at the bigger numbers, 35 times 27, you can see the 35, the 35, the 35, and the 35. And then we have 210 here and here, and because this is a 200 and this is 1 in the tens place, this really does make 210. Now this is green, but remember that it was combined with the 3 here, just as if you would have gotten if you added 210 plus 35, which is why we had the 110 and the 3 tens here to make a 4. So hopefully the colors are helping you see why each different method works, and it's your turn to just decide which one works best for you. And to be honest, there are some times that I would use each of them. So, pick your method and show what you know. Alright, I'm going to pick one method for each of these, and you simply check your answers. No matter which method you chose, it's important you got your answer correct. 45 times 27. For this one, I'll do grid. 45 times 27. 40 times 20 is 800. 20 times 5 is 100. 5 times 7 is 35. And 7 times 40 is 280. Now I'm going to combine what I can do in my head. I know that this is 135 and this is 1080. So now I'm going to add those two together. So 1,215 is what I got for this one. Alright, for this problem I'm going to use traditional multiplication. Again, you don't have to have solved it the way I'm solving it, you just have to get the answer that I got. 36 plus 3 is 39. 2,772. And then on this last one, I'll draw a lattice and review how to do lattice. Seven times 6, 7 times 4, 4 times 5, 6 times 5, 6 times 3, 4 times 3. And now, after I've used the boxes to help me figure out what I'm multiplying, I can ignore all the lines except for the diagonal ones which are my place value lines. 8, 4, 4 plus 8, 3, 11, 12, carry the 1, 2, 22,848 is your answer.